What is going on, guys? Randall Thor 19, the man with the million, back again with another video. Hope you guys are having a really good Saturday. It's nice and sunny down here in Chicago, so I'm loving it. But let's get into this Rand's Rant. It's an interesting article presentation that I came across that I wanted to talk about because I thought it was extremely interesting. Cliff Bleszinski, good old Cliffy B, is back in the news, and I wanted to kind of discuss what he had talked about. Now, he was just at the Reboot Develop conference, and he basically said and gave a presentation about why the AAA video game model is in a really, really weird spot and almost unsustainable unless you're an Activision, 2K, or Sony. Now, this isn't the first time like Cliffy B's kind of said stuff like this. Like a couple years ago, he said that video games should basically just be multiplayer only because nobody finishes the single player, which is why Lawbreakers is multiplayer only. So I was kind of interested in like finding out and listening to more of what he had to say about this subject. Now, he likened the AAA game development business basically, and he compared it to the restaurant business, basically saying that we get the same thing everywhere. So when you're going around trying to find food, all the major cities across the world, in the United States, all basically have the same places to eat. And he said, they're not bad, they're not great, they're just there. And then he started to talk about with AAA, it's become a category of 8 games that are getting repeated over and over again. He put up a slide, and he showed, he showed off the best-selling games like Uncharted 4 and Call of Duty. But he stressed that those games are great games, but they cost hundreds of millions of dollars to produce and market. And most consumers out there view blockbuster franchises as the name and that most people are too scared to take a risk on IP because the games themselves are $60 and people have gotten burned on, stuff like DLC, patches, things like that. A lot of people don't necessarily spend $60 more than maybe 3 or 4 times a year on video games, right? And he talked about how unless you're Sony, Activision, or 2K, that AAA business model is unsustainable. Like for Sony, he talked about Horizon Zero Dawn and how that game was in development for 5 or 6 years, and that's okay because Sony is in the business of selling consoles, not necessarily hundreds of millions of copies of Horizon Zero Dawn, right? And I mean, I get that point. Like, the idea with consoles is that you want to sell as many consoles as possible so you can get as many people as possible on your service to buy subscriptions and the games so that you can make money on it. So Horizon Zero Dawn serves as a purpose, like exclusive games serves as a purpose for reasons to pick up the console. And he didn't really say they would be fine with Sony would be fine with Horizon Zero Dawn bombing, but basically that Horizon Zero Dawn had another reason to exist other than just to sell copies of the game, right? And he talked like Activision and 2K, and he didn't mention Microsoft, which I could see why, because they've canceled a lot of games recently. So maybe the AAA development thing is unsustainable for Microsoft. I don't know if he would know, but I mean, they did just recently cancel Scalebound and, the Fable Legends stuff. So maybe Microsoft is kind of feeling, the burn of not selling as many Xbox Ones as they initially had projected or whatever. But it's an interesting thought that basically this AAA development model, which everybody loves AAA games. That's why you buy a PlayStation or Xbox. You want to play those big AAA games, Star Wars, Uncharted, Gears of War, Halos, but they all cost so much money to make, and some of them don't sell enough. I mean, just last year we had Titanfall 2, Watch Dogs 2, Dishonored 2, all AAA productions with a lot of, big, huge budgets, but they didn't sell very well, and I doubt we're ever going to get a Titanfall 3. Who knows if we'll get another Watch Dogs? We probably won't get another Dishonored, which is kind of very disappointing. So I almost kind of agree here with Cliffy that the AAA games industry is kind of unsustainable. Games are basically costing more and more money every single year, but they keep that price at $60. And you know they want to charge more, they just can't, because every single game has that loot box factor now, right? Where you can buy the loot box and get like skins and stuff like that and cosmetics. And I mean, just look at For Honor, look at Gears of War, look at Halo 5, look at Uncharted 4, look at all the games, all the big, huge AAA games recently that have that loot box kind of mechanic, microtransaction DLC. It's pervading a lot of video games, primarily because, like Cliffy B's saying, the AAA video game industry is not, it's a weird position because those games that people want to play are costing millions and millions and more to develop every single year, and the developers have to figure out another way of making money. Now, he also had some more stuff to say that he talked about if your developer wanted to make a mark, you should aim for what is referred to as a AA, right? A AA game, which isn't a AAA game, but it's like a step below. And he talked about the successes of Warframe, Rocket League, and Rust. When he describes AA, he considers AA games to be games that look great and play great, but pick their battles in terms of budgeting and marketing. And then he also said that most successful AA games are digital and or free to play only. It's an interesting kind of take on it. He said most developers should go that route. Pick your battles, multiplayer only, your marketing and stuff, because you really can't compete with the big boys, the Call of Duties and things like that. And Warframe, Rocket League, and Rust are some, good examples of extremely successful AA games, although he didn't really... you could probably have some examples of a couple AA games that weren't as successful, but, his presentation was like, hey, like you should do this. Obviously, in that scenario, you're not going to say, AA is great, here are games that are great in AA, but then here's a couple games that, didn't do as well. But I mean, there's no denying that Rocket League and Warframe and Rust are extremely successful because they had a limited budget, and they followed up on what matters most, which to Cliff is basically multiplayer. It's why his own game, Lawbreakers, is basically a multiplayer-only game. He also talked about how developers really only have one shot to make a new IP, and he talked about Raven Software. They made a great game in Singularity. I played Singularity. I thought Singularity was great. But it didn't sell well for a myriad of reasons, whether it's the marketing or whatever, or release date, even though the game got great reviews. And now they're just part of the multi-headed hydra that is Call of Duty. So you get one chance to make a new IP, is what he's saying, and then that's kaput. Now we got Guerrilla Games recently just put out Horizon Zero Dawn, seemed to have caught on, so they'll probably be making that moving forward. But yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? I mean... If you look on the Xbox side, Sunset Overdrive, Rise, games that didn't sell particularly too well or light the charts on fire, they never got a sequel. And there's always kind of that, he said, she said stuff about why there isn't a Sunset Overdrive 2. I've heard multiple different things on, Microsoft didn't want to make one or Insomniac didn't want to make one. But, I mean, what Cliffy B here is saying is probably most likely true, that you get that one chance to make the new IP, and if it doesn't sell well, then what's the point of following it up with the sequel? Obviously, people have spoken. And, I mean, who knows? Sunset Overdrive 2, probably, if it ever does happen, whether it's a couple years from now, it happened because people asked for it, but it would have happened if it fucking, sold extremely well right out of the gate, and we would have sequels to that and Rise and other games like that. He also talked about VR and how he said VR is in its 80s stage right now, and that it needs to be cheaper. And the graphics need to be better and things like that. I mean, it sounds like he's still big into VR, but he understands like the limitations and why exactly it hasn't really took off as much yet. But yeah, it's a pretty good presentation. I enjoyed checking it out and reading about it and stuff. Some really interesting things there. Yeah, I don't know, the AAA games thing being unsustainable. That kind of is scary when you think about it, because most of the games that people play now, even though indies come out every week at the rate of like 5 a week, a lot of people just look forward to the new AAAs. And if those go away because they're too expensive, what kind of happens to video games? Are we going to see more and more and more of a push of microtransactions and loot boxes in every form of AAA games in the future? Are more AAA games in the future going to be multiplayer only? Because Cliffy says that's the way to go, multiplayer only. I mean, I know Star Wars Battlefront went from multiplayer only to a campaign. Titanfall went from a multiplayer only to a campaign, and it looks like it sold worse than the first game. I mean, hopefully Star Wars Battlefront 2 sells way better than the first one, because if it doesn't, then you have two cases right there where the first game that was multiplayer only sold better, you know, than the second one that was included a campaign. And I know there's different factors to why Titanfall 2 didn't do so well and things like that. But look, as someone who enjoys good single player experience, that kind of worries me. So yeah, I don't hopefully the AAA model continues for a long time, because I like playing AAA games just as much as I like playing and finding those small indie gems out there. But anyways, guys, hope you liked the video. The link will be in the description to the article if you guys want to check it out for yourself. If you liked the video, hit that like button, consider subscribing for more content, and I will see everybody later.